we are going to talk about a very interesting article that Mitch put together. And I know he's not here to talk about it. Like I said, you can read his thoughts. We're going to share our thoughts on his thoughts and have kind of a more layered discussion here. But Mitch wrote an awesome article for our partners over at the Transfer Portal. Please follow them if you haven't already. Make sure that you are reaching out to them at Transfer Portal CFB on Twitter. But he wrote an article talking about, as we get into spring football, what is one question that each SEC team must answer or wants to have answered coming out of spring ball. So, Garrett, I think we're going to take, at least starting wise, we'll see how much time we have, but we're going to start with at least 3 teams from the East and the West. And if we don't talk about the team that you're interested in, please go out and read that article. It'll be linked in the podcast description. But we're going to start with the SEC East, and we're going to start with the top dogs, Georgia. And I think the question that Mitch had for them was a very interesting one, because it's very easy to say, Georgia has all the questions answered already, right? But they will be going through a lot of changes this year. They're losing talent. They're going to turn over talent every single year as they graduate a ton of people to the NFL draft. But Mitch's question for Georgia is, what defines the Bulldogs offense this year? They don't have a lot of question marks heading into 2023 because they've won back-to-back titles. But there's a huge quarterback battle that's going to happen, and they're losing a lot on the offensive line. So I think it's going to be really fascinating to see who steps up, who replaces this all this talent that's leaving, that's won so many games in Athens. That's going to start with the quarterback battle between Carson Beck, Brock Vandergriff, easy for me to say, and Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah, no, I think the big question we have is, again, looking at the quarterback spot. Anytime you bring in a new quarterback, no matter what type of program you are, you're going to have some issues to get started, right? It's very rare that a young quarterback as a freshman comes in and just keeps things at the same level. And remember, before Stetson Bennett, we didn't see any real national success out of Georgia. They're always competitive. They make the playoff a few times, but Stetson Bennett has won 2 championships with the Bulldogs, and that shouldn't be understated. This was a 40-year drought that he broke, and I think that's something to credit him for and credit his abilities for, and that's massive shoes to step into if you're any of these guys, right? I think Carson Beck's probably the guy that you're looking to first. But I mean, even look at teams like Clemson, right? Clemson replacing some of that high level stuff with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, DJU clearly hasn't been the guy, no matter how highly touted he was. There are some issues, with him, and obviously he's moved on. And now they're looking at another guy who played a few games as a freshman, and he's going to be trying to take over for the Clemson Tigers this next year and up his game. He didn't look too good against Tennessee. He was running around for his life in that game as well. And so I think you have to just ask yourself, as a Georgia Bulldog fan, can we three-peat, right? Is that on the table with a freshman quarterback? That's where it has to start. You've still got talent. You're still recruiting well, but to see so much of this talent and production walk straight out the door, I'm curious to see what they can do starting at the quarterback spot, and then especially with some of the stuff on the offensive line, some of the stuff at the skill positions, right? Seeing what they can replace there. There's a lot of question marks about the Georgia Bulldogs here, and obviously it all starts at the quarterback position, most important position in sports.
Yeah, and like I mentioned off the top, the offensive line is going to be really interesting too. As Mitch laid out, they lose both starting tackles, Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon. Those two combined to give up a whopping 0 sacks last year. So Stetson Bennett had all the time in the world to throw. He's obviously
Pretty good.
protected. And they're bringing in talent, right? It's not like Georgia's going to have a dearth of talent. They are going to be one of the most talented, if not the most talented team in college football from a recruiting ranking standpoint. But sometimes those transitions don't go as smoothly as you hope. They do have a very easy schedule this year. They have, the jokes are writing themselves about the Bulldogs 2023 schedule. I think their toughest game will probably come in the SEC championship in December. But
right,
it's way too early to just say that they're going to cakewalk into that. They do have a lot of holes to fill, so that's why you have spring ball, to find those positions and find who can fill those gaps. Elsewhere in the division, we go to the Tennessee Volunteers, and obviously they spring onto the scene last year. They have their big breakthrough campaign, and Mitch's question for Tennessee was, will the defense prove doubters wrong again in 2023. And I'm going to read his first little paragraph here from his section on the Volunteers. They finished 91st in the country in total defense and still outperformed expectations heading into the season. If you remember back to our preview shows last summer, that's why I was down on Tennessee. I thought they were going to score 1,000,000 points. I knew Hendon Hooker and that receiving core were going to be electric, but I thought they were going to give up just as many points as they scored. And some of those games they sure did. You go watch that South Carolina tape.
Mm-hmm.
That's exhibit A of what I was worried about going into the season. But they did have a decent pass rush, and that's what really made them click, and that's what made them dangerous on the defensive side of the ball. They couldn't cover very well, and they really struggled to stop the run at times, but they had a good pass rush, and they could get you into those third and long situations and make you pay. So how are they going to move forward without a guy like Byron Young? Because Byron Young was kind of who made that happen this past year. So lots of question marks still. They answered those last year. Do you think they can do it again?
That's really the question, right? You mentioned the South Carolina game. I think most of us thought the South Carolina game was going to be what Tennessee's whole season looked like, right? Where
Absolutely.
who knows if you're going to score 40 or 60 in that game, and who knows what the other side's going to do, right? Obviously, Josh Heupel has things rolling on the offensive side of the ball, which is kind of nice because you don't have to worry about that side of the ball going into the spring. You know what you're getting on offense, and so you can, I think, better indicate where your defense is in spring ball, and especially in the spring game once you get into live reps. I think you're going to be able to tell where you are better because you know that the offense works. You know that the offense is good. You don't have any questions there. The big thing here is obviously Georgia's turning over some talent. We talked about that just a second ago. But if you look around the division, there's probably going to be some tough games. And I'm looking specifically at Kentucky. I think they're getting a definite upgrade at quarterback with Devin Leary. We've talked about that several times. Will Levis, we're not fans on this podcast.
Oh,
We're
I
waiting to
was
see.
though. Man, I wanted that to work so
You
bad last
sure
year.
were. Well,
Kentucky and Devin Leary, that is just a combo sandwich of disappointment for me in 2022. I wanted both of those entities to be so good last year.
for sure. It just didn't work out. On this pod, we've talked about it several times. We don't think that Will Levis ended up being all that good. We thought maybe he would have been going into the season. Definitely wrong. But look, Devin Leary, he's a solid quarterback, really good. I was honestly surprised to see him transfer and to go to Kentucky. I think he gives them an immediate shot in the arm. Look, Missouri has a bunch of talent. They were sneaky a couple times, almost jumped up a bit. Georgia last year.
Yep.
And even looking at South Carolina, they're bringing back a bunch. Again, they're going to be pretty competitive. They put up a bunch of points on them last year. You could even look at Florida with Graham Mertz coming in, and maybe there's a little bit something there. I don't know, but there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for them to mess up and to regress if they can't figure it out on the defensive side, right? There's enough going on in the SEC East that if they don't get this right, that's not even to mention games against Alabama and anything else that they have going on in the out of conference. I'm nervous about their defense. That's what I will say. The defense has to be able to find a way to more consistently get pass rush and then more consistently just keep people from picking up yards and yards and yards. You got to find a way to get off the field. I don't know if it's being aggressive and getting turnovers. I don't know. I don't know what the recipe for success is, but they got plenty of time to work on it in Knoxville.
Yeah, and as Mitch points out in his article, the problem was the big play because they ranked 129th in plays of 10 plus yards, 112th in plays of 20 plus yards, and 100th in plays of 30 plus yards. So it was not a situation where, people were dinking and dunking down the field on Tennessee. They were getting big chunk plays. They were scoring, quick drives, quick strike offenses were having a field day with Tennessee because of that secondary. So they brought in some talent. They have some guys to kind of replace that production at pass rush, but I think that's going to be the key. Their success on defense, I think, again, is going to boil down to if they can get to the passer or rush the passer at the same rate they did last year, because
For sure.
that was the straw that stirred the drink. That's what kept it from really imploding on itself last year. And I think it's going to be the same this year. Garrett, our last one in the East that we've talked about a lot this offseason for various reasons, but we're going to go down to Gainesville and talk about Billy Napier's Florida Gators because, I know you guys, when we talked about this last time, you guys were, talking me off the ledge on Billy Napier. But I'm going to double down here a little bit. I think the Gator faithful really don't like the insults that they're getting about Billy Napier. I think that their little feelings are getting hurt, and they don't like being their head coach being called Sunbelt Billy by their rival fan bases. And if Sunbelt Billy can't win, 8+ games with this schedule this year, I think he's going to be feeling some serious heat. And Mitch's question for them is, can they win in the trenches? And good Lord, if that's your question heading into an SEC season, God help you,
Oh
because
yeah.
we've seen it time and time again. If you are not confident in the trenches, but on both sides of the ball, you could be in for a really long year, regardless of how talented you are, around that. Throw in the fact that they're going to be replacing a guy that's going to go top 10 in the draft at quarterback. I know his stats weren't perfect in college, but replacing that kind of athlete that made your offense go, not going to be an easy task. So, like I said, the question is, can they win in the trenches? Didn't really go according to plan, as Mitch says, outside of the season opening win over Utah. But his focus on Napier's focus on the offensive line has paid dividends for the Gators so far. But they are losing Osiris Torrance. They are losing a couple other key contributors. So I don't know, man. Like, at least on the offensive side of the ball, somebody's going to need to step up.
Oh, for sure. And to talk about the quarterback spot for a second, Graham Mertz is the guy coming in from Wisconsin, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, what's going to be going on in Florida? He's going to get some better help." The offensive line situation at Wisconsin wasn't fantastic last year, and I think a lot of people, that was kind of what they looked at for some of the struggles in Madison, was the offensive line wasn't as productive as it had been in previous years, right? Not a poor effort, but definitely not where they're used to having it as Badgers fans. And if you're struggling with that, he's not the same athlete as Anthony Richardson, right? He's just not. He's certainly got all the tools to be a very good college quarterback, but he's not going to be breaking a vertical jump record at the combine in a couple years. That's not in Graham Mertz's tool bag. Probably, I don't know. Maybe we'll see what he does in the offseason. But I'd be shocked. So you're going to have to protect him. You're going to have to give him time. And I think that, obviously you stud what they're losing. Osiris Torrance is not going to be easy to replace. They've got guys like Keontae Goodwin and Damian George coming in from the transfer portal who certainly looked like they had it going coming out of high school. Maybe haven't shown as much in their college careers yet, but definitely have the potential. The big issue, obviously, with an offensive line, it's never the parts, it's the sum of the parts, right? We've both seen less talented offensive lines that have spent lots of time together perform really well versus lots of star athletes all playing their first game together struggling badly, right? If that's the situation that Florida finds himself in, it's going to be another long season. And when you look across at what's happening with the Florida State Seminoles, and you look down the road at UCF joining the Big 12, and maybe Miami has a little bit better year, it could be really rough to be at the bottom of the state of Florida for the Florida Gators. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, and they put it, to their credit, they put in a lot of work in the transfer portal to try to fix this O-line situation, like you mentioned. That is not easy to do. That is very, like, O-line is the hardest position to recruit out of the portal year in and year out. And so
Definitely.
hopefully this works for them this year. Like, they're hoping that patchwork can work. Like you said, it's your guys that have never played together before. They've never taken practice reps together before. So spring practice is going to be crucial for them to find an ability to gel.
Gracious,